Welcome to Her Game Plan's Fantasy Hot or Not list. I'm going to get you set up with all the things that you need to know for fantasy football this week and just learn how to play fantasy football. But let's be real, we have to talk about it. Injuries in the NFL suck for the NFL, especially when they're put in the game and they make a good play and they're hurt. In this week's case, a lot of people didn't even make that good play and were hurt and left you with a goose egg in your lineup. I apologize for that because that is the love-hate relationship that we are going to have with fantasy football. The injury bug is bad this year and I am so sorry for it, but hopefully you can take the tips that we learned from the Fantasy Hot or Not list and apply them to our fantasy strategy. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into what we need to know this week. We only have 2 teams on bye, so you won't have to do as much rearranging, hopefully I say. But the 2 teams on bye this week are the Chicago Bears and the Dallas Cowboys. You might take a hit, but hopefully you have some people on your bench because there's not as many people on bye. But again, injuries are bad. So let's stream, let's get to the waiver wire, and let's pick up those people that are going to help us maximize our points as we've learned from the Fantasy Hot or Not list. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into fantasy football fundamentals. All right, Fantasy Football Fundamentals is the segment that will be breaking down different fantasy football fundamentals for you to be able to better understand how to play the game. And this week, we're going to talk all about understanding our matchups. And this is crucial and something I didn't realize until a few years in of playing, that you really have to analyze who your players are going up against in order to maximize your players when they are played, maximize your points, basically put the right players in at the right time so that way you can win. So understanding our matchups, analyzing weekly matchups to maximize points, including considering weather, defense, strength, and player conditions. So first we're going to talk about defense because I think that this is what matters the most. So defensive rankings, evaluating how opposing defenses perform against specific positions. For instance, some defenses may be strong against the run, but weak against the pass. And I have kind of mentioned that when I give you my hot or not list of, what teams are going to excel because the defense is weak in passing, so on and so forth. But I have an example for you. Think of it like choosing a date spot. Some places are great for dinner, but terrible for dancing. In football, some defenses are tough against runners, but not so good at stopping passes. Knowing this helps you decide who to date or start that week. So we want to date the right people at the right spot. We need to choose whether or not it is worth putting a player in, even though they excel, but that defense is tough against that position. So start analyzing your lineup and looking at who they're playing in order to see, okay, yeah, they're playing the Jets. They're really good at stopping the run, but they're terrible at stopping the pass. So I'm going to go ahead and play my strong receiver over my running back and my flex spot. That's just an example. Now we're going to talk about home versus away because some players, this is crucial. Analyze how players perform at home versus on the road. Some players may have better statistics when playing at home due to familiar conditions and the home crowd support. So we're going to put this in girl terms. It's like how some people feel more confident at their own parties, right? Players often perform better in the home crowd at their home stadium rather than on the road. So if you have a player that's like that, maybe you should determine whether or not it's the best to start him. But some players excel on the road. So you really want to do your research to be able to maximize that player's potential. Next up, we are going to talk about weather conditions because if you listen to yesterday's episode of Her Game Plan, we talked about Lambeau Field. And Lambeau Field is in Wisconsin and is not a dome. So you're going to be playing in snow when winter months come. It is one of the toughest stadiums to play in my opinion. But when talking about fantasy football, weather conditions, consider, it has an impact on the players. Rain, snow, high winds can affect passing and kicking games, potentially reducing the fantasy output of quarterbacks, wide receivers, and kickers. But also, if it's snowing, it's going to impact everyone. I've seen it. So, for example, imagine planning an outdoor wedding. If it's raining or super windy, it might mess things up. This is similar to bad weather during football. It can mess with the football game, especially for passing and kicking. So, if you see that it's going to be in Lambeau Field on a December night and they're not a Green Bay Packer, you're probably going to want to start somebody else. So just go ahead and look at the forecast for your NFL teams. I promise this might sound absurd, but you're going to win games if you look at these matchups for your players, because you're going to maximize a lot with this. Injury reports. Obviously, we've all been bitten by the injury bug, and if you haven't, I want to see your team. I want to see your team because you've been bitten by the injury bug. You need to stay updated on injury reports for both offensive and defensive players. If a star defensive player is hurt, an opposing offense might have an easier time scoring points. So, for example, Lions defense might be a little bit more vulnerable now because we lost Aiden Hutchinson, and that's just the fact of the matter. So, when you are looking at these, you need to be like, oh, okay, so I know that this defense or the Cowboys defense is missing a lot of defensive stars. I want to make sure that I put in this person because they're playing against the Cowboys defense. So, for example, if your favorite band has a concert but the lead singer is sick, the show won't be as good. In football, if a key player is injured, it affects the whole team's performance. So hopefully that helps you dive into understanding your matchup a little bit more, because you want to maximize your players' potential as much as possible, and understanding what they're going up against is only going to help you, especially for those players you're like, oh, I don't know if I should start him or if I should start him. I don't know if I should start, James Cook or I should start Breece Hall. You want to be able to make those decisions with some knowledge, and I got you. Now, time to do your research, ladies, but we're going to go to the hot or not list next. Alrighty, welcome to the Fantasy Hot or Not list. This segment will give you some key players to either start or sit in your fantasy lineup this week. So, without further ado, let's start with the hot ones. Let's start with the spicy ones. Let's start with the guys we want to date. Let's start with the guys that will lead us to a victory. Disclaimer, these are just my opinions. Don't come at me if they don't work, because football's unpredictable. Anyways, we're going to start off with the Los Angeles running back, Kyren Williams. He's going up against the Raiders. In week 5, Kyren rushed for 102 yards and a touchdown. And after a bye week, a week of resting, he's ready to jump back in and to continue his legendary success at the running back position. Not only that, the Raiders are giving up an average of 110 yards per game to the running back position, which makes this a lovely game for Kyren to pop off once again. Moving on, we are going to talk about Baltimore Ravens wide receiver Zay Flowers. He's going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In the first decent matchup for a Ravens wide receiver, Flowers wound up catching all 9 of his targets and had 132 receiving yards. Although there was no score for Flowers, his receptions and yardage was close enough to score 22 points in a full PPR. Now, as for the Bucs defense, remember we're understanding our matchup. The Bucs have allowed over 600 receiving yards in 2 games to the receiving position, wide receiver position. So this opens up a lot of opportunities for Zay Flowers, which means he's hot, ladies. We're going to date him this week. And our hot tight end for the week is Las Vegas Raiders rookie tight end at that, Brock Bowers. He's going up against the Rams. Brock Bowers has the potential to finish as the number 1 tight end on the year. The rookie tight end is second in fantasy tight ends so far this year and is averaging almost 11 yards a catch. He's doing pretty good. his value is through the roof, as fantasy experts would say. Now, as for what he's going up against, the Rams have allowed the 8th most receiving yards to the tight end position this season. So as long as the quarterback room is competent in Las Vegas, Brock Bowers is going to pop off, and he's going to round out our hot list. And as for the not list, let's just get started. These are the guys that you want to sit on your bench because their matchup doesn't look so great this week. Starting off with San Francisco 49ers running back Jordan Mason. He's going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. The last 2 weeks, Mason's attempts have gone down. Not good. His opportunities have gone down, meaning he's not involved in the scheme as much anymore. And although he's averaging about 101 rushing yards per game, he's not having a great matchup against the Chiefs' defense because the Chiefs have only allowed 253 rushing yards all year. Not in one game, all year. So Jordan Mason, I think you're just going to have to sit tight this week, but it's not looking so good. As for the receiver position, we're going to talk about Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver George Pickens. This one's tough. It's tough. He's going to play the Jets on Sunday Night Football. George Pickens has not lived up to his hype this season, his potential this season. Pickens has only had double-digit targets 1 week out of the 6 games that he's been on the field so far this year. He also has yet to score a touchdown. Yeah, not good. As for the Jets, the defense he's going up against, the Jets allowed the most receiving yards they had all season versus the Bills on Monday Night Football, but still, it was only around 120 receiving yards. The opportunity for George Pickens, especially not knowing who's starting, Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, is going to have an impact on his game. Therefore, it's just not your week, Pickens. It's just not your week. And as for our not-so-hot tight end this week, we're talking about Green Bay Packers tight end Tucker Kraft. And I know he was on my hot list last week. He's on my not list this week. He goes up against the Houston Texans. Kraft has been a surprise tight end for pretty much everyone, especially since he's the number 5 tight end on the year. But this sit has nothing to do with his performances. It's solely based on the Texans understanding our matchup. Houston's defense is the 3rd toughest against the tight end position so far this year. So Kraft is going to be in for a tough game, which means let's find a better option this week and start somebody else. And that is going to do it for our hot or not list and this week's fantasy episode. I'm hoping you're enjoying this, and because I enjoy helping you with this, I hope you're using it. I hope you're understanding more, because fantasy football definitely teaches you more about the NFL and it helps you get looped in. So the more girls, the more ladies we can get playing the game, the better. But as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Continue to like and share. Comment on social media. Go ahead and follow on social media. I'm there all week. And I will see you ladies next week. Good luck in your fantasy matchups this week. I wish you the best of luck. We're going to play the field and own the game, ladies. See you next week.